All right, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. My name is Randall Stevens. I've been kind of the ringleader of this Startup Advantage group for the last couple of years. Just real briefly, if you're not familiar with the Startup Advantage, it was really an attempt to start to get all the entrepreneurs in the region out of the woodwork and getting together. So a couple years ago, we started having monthly meetings talking about what it meant, mainly tech startups, and what it meant to build scalable companies and those types of things. So over the last couple of years, we've had lots of meetups. We've done some regional events where we've done exchanges with Louisville and Northern Kentucky. We had a conference in April 2011 with about 150 people and some speakers we brought in from all over the country. So we're just basically everything to do with startups. So what we decided to do tonight was we wanted to try to get as many of the entrepreneurs in the room with as many of all the smart folks who are recently departing Lexmark, and just see if anything comes of it. You know, it's one of those, I believe in organized serendipity. So you just get everybody in the room, give them a beer, and lots of good things can happen out of it. So you can read that in a lot of different ways. Anyway, not a very formal evening, but what we decided to do was just so that the people that aren't familiar with the Startup Advantage can get to know some of the folks. We put together a panel, and I'll let them introduce themselves, entrepreneurs and people kind of involved with the startup and entrepreneurial community around here. And what we want to do is it's for you guys. If you want to ask them questions, what all this is about, don't make it fall back on me to have to see the questions, but we'll, and if you're interested in asking stuff, we'll see if we can hear everybody, but if you want to, you can step forward and we'll hand you the mic and you can ask questions. But it's really just to pick people's brains, and then we'll do this as long as you all want, and then we can break. We did name tags. We were attempting to put some little colored dots so you'd be able to recognize an entrepreneur or somebody that was from Lexmark. But again, the goal is just to introduce ourselves to each other and see if there's any opportunities that could come out of this. It's as simple as that. So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out. So I'm going to pass the mic around. Let everybody introduce themselves.
Hi, how's the sound back there? Good, everyone good? All right, cool.
Come on in, come on up.
Yeah, grab some chairs. These are really comfortable ones. My name's Nick Such. I'm one of the partners at Awesome Inc. We run an early stage seed accelerator program. And I'm also co-founder of Building Layers, which is an indoor mapping technology company.
Hi everyone, my name is Jim Wombles. I'm the founder of Fanbouts, and I just went through the Awesome Inc. Accelerator program this summer, and we are a fan-generated sports news site.
I'm Paul Sullivan. I'm the current founder of Players Golf Network, where we combine the passion of golf with the power of social networking, and when I'm not doing that, I race horses and drive tractors.
I'm Jim Clifton, the CEO of Therex Medical. We're a medical device incubator. We spun out our first company, Bluegrass Vascular Technologies. It's a catheter access device. Both of those companies spun out of the University of Kentucky. I'm a Kentucky native, spent a lot of time away. Data Beam brought me back. Some of you all probably might be familiar with that. I'm an old Beamer. Product manager, software guy, turned medical device guy. So, I go on here.
Hello, my name is Chuck Mix. I'm one of the co-founders of eTech Ventures. We have a company that works with startups, tech startup inventors. We provide the business experience and the startup background that a lot of the tech inventors need to take their companies forward. Been working with a couple companies the last 12 to 18 months in very different spaces. One of them is a company called AMT Nano, which does micro and nano scale machining work and precision alignment assembly on micro products. The other is a company called Custom Kinetics, and they're a company that does electrical stimulation based rehab products, both orthopedic and in the neuro rehab markets. So two very different businesses, but that's what our company does. We work with them to try to take their businesses forward to a point of stability.
And I'll wear my entrepreneur hat too. Again, my name is Randall Stevens. I am serial entrepreneur working on my third startup right now, a company called Pundit, which is, we're building a social layer designed to interact with video in new ways. I started my first company, I was a UK grad in architecture of all things, and started my first company right out of school in '91 called ArcVision, which is now in the 3D graphics software business. I still own that company, but I haven't run it since 2006, I guess. But we have customers all over the world. Our big partner is Autodesk, so anywhere Autodesk is, about 120 countries around the world, we have customers that we support. I helped start another company in 2004. Wasn't planning on running it. Ended up taking over the helm in 2006 and ran that until 2010. Raised about $6.2 million in venture money. That company has since moved and is now out in Denver. And in 2010, when I left that, I either had to make the decision to go back and mess up everybody's day at my first company or start something new. So I opted to start something new. And, so anyway, that's my background. So we'll just open this up for if anybody has any questions they want to ask, and if not, I'm sure we'll get somebody to seat some. First questions? Come on.
All right. What kind of your company? What kind of new ways to interact with video? Exactly what you said.
Ask again, sorry.
What kind of new ways did you say your company used to interact with video?
So this is going to be a pundit sales pitch. Now that I got the stage, we are. The premise of the company was that there aren't very good ways to interact with video today. Started with there's not good ways. You get all this content across the television, and there's not very good ways to interact with it. So we have built a platform that is, I'd say, geared around contextual interaction. So what's different with video than print or a lot of the short form content is that context is very important. So if you're watching, I always give the example in politics. If Barack Obama's giving the 70-minute State of the Union address, there may be 100 different points in that 70 minutes of video where he's talking about something different that somebody wants to interact with. So we built a social media layer that allows people to contextually interact with specific parts of the video. And as that stuff gets shared out, the context is played, and it's very important in that thing. So it's a platform really for content owners, for publishers of video content.
Great question.
How did you guys all get started? Going one by one, where did you start from? What motivated you? How did you get started in all your companies?
So I started about age 4. No, I got started as an entrepreneur actually. Yeah, that was 2 years ago, Bob. Not quite that young. I guess I got started as an entrepreneur mowing lawns as a kid. Progressed into like high school, fixing people's computers. When I was in college, I was on the solar car team at UK while I was studying engineering, and that's kind of when I discovered that there's this like whole other thing you can use engineering for, which is starting companies. With the solar car team, we basically had this high-tech product, a team of like 40 engineers. We raised external capital, and we got to do this like really, really cool thing. So when I graduated, I was going to get my MBA. I was on a 2-year deferral for that, and they said, hey, go figure out what business is like. So I decided, hey, maybe I'll try and start a company with some friends. I had a few friends who were a year behind me in engineering school at UK. We looked at some large format touchscreen technology, and they did that as their capstone design project. At the end of the semester, we found customers, people who wanted to buy basically like the output of their homework assignment as a product. So we kind of accidentally started this company, which since has totally changed. So we do a web-based indoor mapping tool. So I guess the long story short is that it was kind of an accident, but by doing something, we found ourselves in the right place at the right time in this kind of new growing market. And Randall, I have to mention something about the Governor Scholars Program. So actually, I think 2 of my co-founders, so those of you who aren't familiar with the Governor Scholars Program, it's like nerd summer camp. And two of my co-founders, when we originally started this company, were governor scholars, so pretty interesting network around the state of Kentucky.
I started out in sales, which was a pretty traditional route. And started at Merrill Lynch out of college. I graduated UK and went on to a few other sales jobs. And a few years ago, I was fired after coming in at 96% of my quota and busting my ass the whole year. And so that was sort of a wake-up call for me, and I realized that I wanted to have more control over my future. So I started initially a large format printing business called Giant Printing and Graphics. And that is subsequently closed. We kind of struggled with making payments and learned a lot of lessons from my mistakes. And so, anyways, wanted to start a tech startup, web-based startup, and had the good fortune to meet Nick and Brian Rainey from Awesome Inc. And they had the opportunity to join their accelerator program, which, if any of you all are considering entrepreneurship, it would be an awesome opportunity to join that program. Yeah, awesome. And anyway, so I came up with the idea for Fan Bouts, and been working on it ever since, which would be since, I guess, June, late June is when we started.
Sorry to interrupt, but that wasn't the original idea, was it?
No, yeah, we started with I came into the program and started with an idea called WeWannaRide.com, which was sports related, where you could find and ride a tour bus to your favorite team's away game. We did some market research and using the lean startup principles, figured out that the market wasn't very large for this opportunity. So we pivoted mid-program in July. So technically our company was, I keep saying our, but I'm the sole founder. Yeah, the royal we. We were technically founded on July 10th, so really we've only been going for a few months.
So I failed to mention earlier that Players Golf Network is actually my fourth venture. Like some others, my first venture really was a couple of guys sitting around a bar saying, we're tired of working for other people, let's go do something ourselves. And having already been involved in business, we set up a shingle and just started consulting in areas that we were comfortable with, had contacts in, and built a business up, and had a fortunate exit there. My second venture was one that I actually invested in, was a passive investor. The business started to go sideways, and the board came to me and asked me if I'd take over, and kind of built that up. And had a relatively good exit there. We took the company public. Now, the last one, the Players Golf Network, I was sitting on my tractor, as I mentioned earlier, just enjoying life and raising horses, and I was actually recruited by a headhunting firm because of my profile in LinkedIn. So one takeaway for everybody here is make sure that people are aware of your skills and your capabilities and your interests, because more and more people are out there searching for assistance, or people either co-found businesses with them or take over businesses based on what they see as being your public persona. So I would encourage you to do things like LinkedIn, build your own sort of website, your own online presence, and get your name out there if you're interested in being involved in startup.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking how to answer this question. I'm not sure I have a straightforward answer, other than networking with people in the communities and folks that I've worked with has really opened a lot of doors. I mean, one of the things that I sort of look back at the hallmark of what I've done is I've always found myself answering questions, really, really complicated questions about stuff I really didn't know much about. I enjoyed that challenge, and so, you know, I got sort of known for that, right? So raising money in startups is almost a nebulous art, and when somebody has that challenge, they'd call me, say, "Can you help me raise this money?" For some reason, I'd say yes. And my career sort of really is that way. I mean, I'm a liberal arts graduate, so I spent a lot of time in banking and finance learning business. I have children now, and they're always, Dad, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. It's the wrong question to ask yourself. It's really a lot easier to say, what don't you want to do? That's a hell of a lot easier for me to say. You know, I tried sales, did it for 2 years, gained a huge appreciation for that business. I'm not a sales guy. Learned a lot, but I sort of started marking those things off. And firm believer in sort of critical thinking and all these crazy the skills and the crazy times you go through as a startup person. Being flexible, micro to macro in 30 seconds or less, and do that 80 times a day. You know, it's a fascinating journey, and I don't really know how to answer your question. I mean, people say, well, you're an entrepreneur. I never have actually ever thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I guess I'm doing entrepreneurial things. Doing startups is vastly more interesting. I at one point came back to Lexington, interviewed at Lexmark, got offered a job and said, I will blow my brains out if I take this job. I worked at Nortel, right? So Nortel, Lexmark, they looked identical. I was an RTP. Literally, Dr. Todd called me 3 months later and I went to work for Lee Todd in a startup because I saw the internet at Nortel. And I instantly noticed when I saw the internet, I made an epiphany that said, that's completely and wholly different. I've got to do something with that. I've got to quit doing what I'm doing now. And I showed up 3 months later working for Dr. Todd building servers for the internet, which I had no idea what I was doing. I was a product manager at Nortel. I took those skills and became a product manager at DataBeam. Sold that business and went to do something else. If you're in Lexington, you've got to create your own business, your own job. I have friends from all over the country who call me and say, God, what's the job market like? And I said, don't come. If you have a job in your pocket, come. But it's got to be your job. There's no job here for you. Especially if I'm now over 45, forget it, right? So, I don't know how to answer that question other than sort of recount a lot of experience, but it's a good question.
Well, apparently I'm not the smartest guy in the world because it took me about 20 years to figure out what it was I really wanted to do. Looking back, I could see a pattern of taking more progressively entrepreneurial assignments. I was working for big companies and small companies alike, but I kept taking assignments that were more and more entrepreneurial, less defined, murky, cutting edge, things nobody had ever done before kind of stuff. And I was excited by that kind of activity. So it took me a while to figure out that's what I really like doing. And so before I started my company in 2010, I worked for Belcan Engineering in Lexington here and worked for Ralph Anderson. And Ralph was a very entrepreneurial guy, and he gave me the runway to do what I needed to do. And so I loved the job when Ralph was there. Ralph passed away in 2010. Things changed at Belcan, and I thought, you know, this is my event. This is my time to step out and do something else, and that's what I did. So I'm happy I did that. It just took me 20 years to figure out what it was that I really liked about my career, and now I'm able to use that experience that I gained through working for others to work in the startup community.
I'm just crazy. So I've always been crazy, and I've always do my own thing. So there's the whole nature versus nurture, question about entrepreneurs, and I'm one of those. Definitely, it was just in me. And like I said, I started my first company even before I was out of college, and I've been doing stuff ever since. I think a couple of things two things that I was thinking about while this went on. First of all, it wasn't serendipity that I put this panel together. Everybody thinks entrepreneurs look like Nick, but in reality, they tend to look more like us. The average entrepreneur, in fact, I saw a study a few weeks ago. It's like the average entrepreneur is 45, in their mid-40s. So it's not necessarily a 20-year-old, 22-year-old that is doing that, even though obviously the bright ones break out and do amazing things. And the other thing that I was thinking about was actually before this gathering was, what did I want to come out of this? For me, you all did. Everybody that's here obviously did the first thing, which is show up. You know, the thing about being an entrepreneur is you're trying to separate the signal from the noise, but you've got to just iterate. You got to go out and just experiment and do things. So for me, the biggest advice to anybody who is working on anything new or wanting to work on things new is to not, first of all, the new thinking in startups is don't think that you know what you're talking about. Just like Jim said, he thought that he had it all figured out at his kitchen table, that he was going to have a business that was putting people on buses to go to sporting events. After he dug into it, the customer development, what we now call the customer development process, was, holy cow, there's another opportunity that's tangent, related, but not exactly what I was thinking about. And you only get that by going out and having lots and lots of conversations. I'm sure Jim would. And then, John, do you mind walking up here? John's got on a shirt. I want to show you guys what we, at our conference last year, this was the shirts that we had made. He's covering up our little drawing, but I always say, this is my favorite drawing. This is what entrepreneurship is about. Chaos, complete, utter chaos on the left-hand side, working towards an answer. And it's an iterative design, it's an iterative process that you go through. And I think the challenge is, and it's okay, most of the world cannot survive in here. They would pull their hair out and cry themselves to sleep every night. But some people get a lot of kicks out of it, and when you learn to be comfortable in it, it can actually be a really exciting place to be. So part of what we do at Startup Advantage and getting all these entrepreneurs is to help people understand how to make sense of what can a lot of times look like chaos in the early stages. And then, by the time Jim figures fan bouts out, he might be right here where our line is. By the time he really figures out how the company is up and running and a known business model and people paying him and he knows he's got employees, that may be another 3 or 4 years. I mean, literally, it can take this long. I'm now resolved to, thanks John, my prop, John Meisher. I've looked at my own cycles through this stuff. It's a 5 to 7 year cycle. About every 5 to 7 years, I start something. It takes that long to get it to where it's either going to be. Sometimes you'll know if something's completely dead. Luckily, I've had runway of most of mine lasting years. But you get them up, and by the time the incubation cycle is about 5 to 7 years. The anomalies. One of the things I used to say about Arc Vision, my first company, was we will be a 15-year overnight success story. By the time everybody knows about it, they think it happened overnight, but it takes years and years and years. So anyway, just some tidbits. Any other questions?
So some of us aren't in positions in life where we can tolerate that kind of chaos. And I think I'm speaking for some of us. Some of us aren't looking to start up. Some of us are looking for work. So when you're in the midst of that chaos yourself, I mean, where does that put you with looking for employees? Like, how can I get connected with an entrepreneur?
So, one of the things I think you have to ask yourself if you want to go work for a startup, whether you're a founder, an entrepreneur, or whether you just want to be part of the experience, is whether you can tolerate that kind of ups and downs that exist in an organization that's trying to find their way along. Because whether you're the founder or not, you have to be willing to deal with constant change, a great deal of uncertainty, and as much as I think founders would like to say one of their objectives are to always provide a safe and secure environment for their employees, they have to understand that they're signing up for something that has a high likelihood of failure and isn't the best when it comes to job security. But one of the things I will say is if you prefer to be an employee, you can still often enjoy the immense highs and sort of devastating lows, sometimes within the same 24-hour period, as the founder, without necessarily having all the responsibilities. And I think the other thing that you could learn is that many startups today will offer some of the benefits, including shares or options in a company. So you have, some sort of tangible attachment without necessarily being the guy that's on the hook for making all the decisions. Because I will say that we can paint a good picture here, but being a founder of a company often means making really, really difficult decisions and letting people go, telling people that even though they just left a secure company to come work for you, the money isn't there and they may want to be looking for their next job. And so, I think you really do have to be a little introspective and ask yourself, what kind of challenge do I want to take on? But I do see a lot of people here with green stickers from Lexmark, and I think one of the things that people that work with big companies will also say is that job security isn't what it once was. And often I hear people that go work for small companies or startups say they would never trade the experience for working for a big company again. So.
One of the things I would add to that, and my experience is very much like that. I mean, I came out of big companies and went to a very small company. One of the things that I think is an advantage in a startup is especially if you're a tech person, if you're a techie, you get to do more creative, more just wide-ranging, crazy stuff than you would ever in a very well-defined swim lane at a big company, where you've got a niche or a piece of the pie that you're responsible for because there's such a distributed workforce. The other thing is that even if you're not technical in your background, startups are a place where you can get a broad business background. You've got to be a jack of all trades to work in that environment. And so if that's something that you're interested in, it may be worth taking a little bit of risk that, hey, a year from now I may not have a job if we can't get this thing off the ground and get it funded and whatever. But boy, I spent a year learning things I would have never learned in 10 years at a big company. And I think that's been the attractiveness for me. And I see that in a lot of the employees I work with, that their eyes are wide open with what they're able to get into that they wouldn't have necessarily been able to in a large company. So I don't want to downplay the risk, but I do think that it's a good opportunity if you're in that mindset.
Yeah, I would just quickly echo what Chuck said, which is that in a startup environment, in any small company, you get to see all parts of the business, and that to me is fun. I call it the ultimate game. I consider what I do is like, if you think about building a business as a game, it's the most complicated thing in the world because there's so many variables involved and so many aspects of what it means to make the thing go. So it's much different than being, one piece of a large organization. You've got a lot of structure. There is no structure in a startup. Zero. And structure in the early stages is not conducive to what you need to do as a startup. And really the reason that we started this Startup Advantage group, Jim and several others of us that had been through this stuff was to help get the information out. And the kind of new thing about startups is startups are not businesses. That's the best way to think about it. They are not a business yet. They're trying to figure out if their idea can become a business. So it's really more of an investigation. And if you approach it from that standpoint, it's when you take a known business model and try to apply it from day one to a startup, you're doomed for failure for the most part, because there's just so many unknowns. So you have to really think about it differently. And the good news is that this thinking, not only here, but around the world, is starting to be more known. There's a lot of new information about how to think about this stuff, how to think about it successfully. But for me, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I've resolved it. For me, it's the ultimate game. It's fun. When When I don't, I always like to say, when I don't sleep at night, sometimes it's for worry, but most of the time it's for excitement, and that's great. And, you can't trade. I wouldn't trade that for anything.
I was just going to say, do your homework. If you interview the company, ask them for financial statements. Find out how much cash he's got in the bank. Ask how much they burn a month. Then do the calculation. They have 2 years worth of money in the bank, a lot more stable than 2 months. They won't tell you that kind of stuff, then you probably don't want to talk to them. It is every time I hire somebody to a startup, it is a very deep commitment on both sides. I want this person to know exactly where we are, because when the shit hits the fan, they got to know it. If it does hit the fan, and it will, in some way, shape, or form, it'll be different than what you think it is going into it. So do your homework, get to know the investors, the advisors of that company, and find out how much risk you want to take. Paul brought up a good point, so I'll just pass it on. There's a lot of people here with a lot of experience. Go be an advisor to one of these companies. Go volunteer your time. Learn what it's like to be involved with one of these companies and see this and say, is this good for me? Right? Go carry it back for a while. If you got time, go do that. Become an advisor. It's a great way to learn. It's a great way. This is a community of people. You start seeing the same faces. That could help underwrite some of the concern you might have for risk.
I just had a few thoughts for anyone that's actually considering starting a business. How many of you guys have ever had that epiphany, like, I need to start this business? So, like, most of us, right? Everyone has, right? A couple of things that I would suggest. First of all, there's a great book called The Lean Startup. It's by Eric Ries. You definitely want to read it. Things have changed since we were in business school, or even school in general. I know at UK the Lean Startup principles weren't even taught. They treated a startup as if it were a business, like Randall said, and you do that, you're doomed to failure. You know, you start out creating a business plan, your business plan is shit, because you haven't even identified if you have a viable business. So you're not a business. A startup is a completely different beast. It's a frantic search for a business model that's going to work. So I would definitely recommend anyone that's seriously considering it, go out and get the book, The Lean Startup, by Eric Ries. Second thing I wanted to mention was there's an event coming up called Startup Weekend, and it's here in Lexington, November 16th through the 18th. It's a weekend, and you show up Friday around 5 or 6, and what it is a lot of people that show up, you're committed to the whole weekend to join a team. You get 60 seconds to pitch your business idea to everyone that shows up. I think last year we had how many? About 70 people. And basically what happens is everyone gets 60 seconds to pitch their business idea. That usually takes about an hour. Then the whole group will vote on the 6 or 7 best ideas. Then what happens, once those best business ideas have been identified, everyone joins the team they want to work with. Okay, and so the goal is to come out of Startup Weekend by that Sunday night at 6 o'clock with a viable business. And what you'll have access to, and you guys are perfect for this opportunity, are people with programming experience, people with business development experience, designers. Essentially, if you end up having a team of people that can fill in all these holes, you can come out of this Startup Weekend with a business that's essentially up and started. And so I think it's a great opportunity for anyone that's seriously considering. It's November 16th at Awesome Inc. downtown, right across the street from Dunkin' Donuts. So.
Next question. Everybody's thirsty. Time to break? All right, well, thanks everybody for coming out. You got a question?
Actually, I'm just kind of curious about the scope of ideas that are what sorts of businesses that you
question was, what's the scope of different kinds of ideas at Startup Weekend?
So there can be a pretty wide range. Most things are web and mobile technology because that's what you can accomplish in 3 days. But really, it's about the search. So the point of the event is to get people outside of the building. It's go talk to customers, figure out should I continue pursuing this path rather than can I actually finish this in 3 days. So we've seen things from like I was in Louisville. They do these all around the world. There was a group in Louisville who started an organic, it was basically a food truck that did farmers markets, but they were like mobile farmers markets. So that was one of the ideas. There was like a physical therapy app that helped you keep track of your exercises. There was another one that was like a local blog aggregator. I've seen photo companies. If you've heard of Zarly, Zarly was like a Craigslist app where you said, I'm willing to pay I don't know, $500 to get the first tickets in the Big Blue Madness line, and so there's a very, very broad range of things that the company's actually, Zarly's pretty successful. They've raised like $13 million in venture capital. Ashton Kutcher is one of their investors. So is that broad range?
Any more? One more.
How did you guys start getting customers? What did you do to get your customers set and start getting a paycheck?
Maybe I'll start. I'm on my third company. So the first company, it started as a services company. So I was out door to door trying to sell service. When we got into the software business, I thought I kind of developed some technology that I thought would go. We actually spent about 6 months developing the first product, took it to the first trade show in Chicago and sold $17,000 worth of it on the floor, $250 at a time. Second company, a lot more technology build up, but we actually started doing some services early, and that tends to be a model that can be used a lot if you're working on something that can, either somebody's got enough pain to pay you very early, so we were doing, we actually targeted in the military market and had contracts to do some work while we were trying to get the product, up to speed. My new company, we're very early in the revenue, and we've got a platform that's a really general platform to use around video. But of all things, we've ended up now in the race market, foot race market. So to amplify that where you think you're going to be is not necessarily where you end up. You always have you always have a vision for where you're going, and then along the way you do things that keep you along that path, but you find new opportunities. So we're in a niche right now where we're rolling out in the foot race market, what I call a vertical market app that's built on our core platform. And we're just starting to roll that out, so we've got customers. How do you get customers? So you do a lot of things usually for free to start, but you don't tell anybody that you're doing it for them for free, and then you end up having other people that assume that everybody's paying for it, and they'll start paying for it if it's something that people want. But, it's lots of word of mouth, and in the end, that's part of what we recorded a little show earlier before you guys all showed up. We're going to start a whole series of interview shows, and I was talking about on the show that back when I was in that services business, and I was green as could be, right out of school and doing all this kind of work, and I used to go to these meetings all the time, and we were doing high-end visualization animation. So back in the late 80s, early 90s, this was this is pre-pixel. This is the fanciest stuff in the world. What it took me literally probably way longer than it should have, 2, 3, 4 years to understand was I started calling them happy meetings. I had happy meetings. I'd get meetings all the time with people who I thought were going to be customers. And those meetings, and I was, there were those extreme highs. You went and had this great meeting, they loved what you were doing, all this stuff was great, but that did not equate to that they were going to hire you to do something, right? So I started calling them happy meetings. You got to avoid, or you got to understand happy meetings, and you got to figure out how do you now cut to the chase. You know, how do you read through that to figure out, because you want to spend your time not in happy meetings, right? So it's you know, I don't know that there's you know, talking with a lot of people about what their experiences are is one good way to learn those kinds of things or try to shortcut it. Most of us that have been through it in any kind of a sales front end know, you know, how to avoid happy meetings and get to who's the decision maker, what are the questions to ask to see if you get to a decision. If they're not going to make that decision, you move on to the next one, right? So you want to have a big enough pipeline to be able to move through that. So that's the way I would answer it.
Corollary to that is there are very few companies for which keeping something secret is a strong advantage in this stage. So you're much more likely that like no one hears about you at all. So I think the biggest thing is to share very openly what it is you do. Tell anyone who will listen. Tell them to tell their friends. We got one of the customers we're working with right now found out about us because the guy I sit next to at a co-working space had his Google chat status with a link to our website. And someone in Philadelphia found out about it. So be very open, share what you do. Secrets, there are very few. There are a few scenarios, especially more on the medical side, but for most things at this stage, tell everyone you know.
Throughout my career, I've done a lot of business development of established products for established companies, and that, what I wanted to say is it's different. If you're coming from that environment and you're used to that, when you're selling in a startup, you're selling before you even have a product in a lot of cases. And so what Nick said is true. Tell everybody in the world what you're doing, but you use your customer, your potential customer base, your target customers, as a good way for you to further develop your products, to test your product concepts, and those become your early adopter customers. Those are the ones that are your stars and will attest to how great your product is once you're on the market fully. But it's a little different than when you're in an established company and you're waiting for a product release and then you go sell that product. You know, that's not what you do at a startup. So.
Just one other quick thing with my latest, you know, a month ago, we've got this app now in the race market. We've done a few regional events. We've actually got a couple of paying customers in the region. So we were looking at how do we scale this, how do we go to market, basically. Just to give you guys some scale, the race market is huge. There's about, our estimates now are 75,000 events per year globally that are being run. So it's a huge and growing market. And about a month ago, I sat and just used all the resources I could to blindly find, try to track down event organizers. We were looking at the timing companies and all the people that are involved in the race industry. I just started sending out, I designed an email that I would just start sending out. So as anybody in sales knows, you just have to be persistent because 99% of those emails are not going to get answered. One of those emails that I sent was to one of the 4 big race timing companies that's based out of Australia. We're doing our first race in Australia this weekend, actually. So we're getting ready to roll out through his channel. You just have to put it out there, and then when you get a hit, you hone in and you learn, you iterate through that, learn. So we're very quickly trying to figure out I'll claim I don't even know if that's the right way right now. That's our thinking, because that's how we're going to go to market through that channel. But I'm going to give that the next 3 or 4 months as we iterate and go through it and find out if that's the right way or not. So a lot of it's just trying things, know when to measure, know if you're successful, and then move on to the next. Any other last questions? All right, so we're gonna officially break, but everybody for sure stay around. I put hopefully we have dots out. There are literally hundreds of years of startup experience in the room, so take advantage of that. Everybody's got these orange, lightly colored dots. Ask them questions. You can tell. We love to talk about what we're doing and anything that we can share with you guys if you're thinking about it or haven't done it. And hopefully we'll see more of you out in the coming months. Keep networking. you never know what comes out of these things. So, thanks for coming out.
Thanks for our panel.